Hello Exiles, it's Dosi here bringing you my very first build guide. I've tried my best to be thorough, but I may have made some mistakes or forgotten some things. I'll try to address anything I may have forgotten in the comments. I've also timestamped the video so you can jump to the parts you're interested in. For those who don't know me, which is quite literally everyone since I'm not a streamer, nor a pro gamer, nor even a really good gamer for that matter, I'm a one build a league type of guy. In this video, I'll be showcasing and sharing the build I made and played for the Trials of the Ancestors League that completely blew my mind and exceeded all my expectations by a huge margin. My low-life cold convert EK Hierophant. Welcome to my build guide. When 3.22 was announced with the return of Sanctum, I knew I had to make a build that was able to run it smoothly, but since I only play one build every league, I also wanted my build to be able to clear everything. That means I wanted my build to freeze everything for Sanctum, go really fast, deal loads of damage while still being reasonably tanky. I also wanted a clean playstyle with few buttons to press. For those reasons, we chose the Ethereal Knives skill gem, because it's a physical skill, which means it's easy to convert the damage to cold, and then use heatshiver to basically double our damage. It's also very comfortable to play, because it doesn't require aiming if you get the helm enchant, or since it's a projectile skill, once we get the unique ring, nimis. The Hierophant Ascendancy gives us everything we need for the build. It gives us mana reservation efficiency of skills, 50% reduced mana cost of skills, free minimum endurance and power charges, some extra damage and energy shield scaling through mana, but most of all it gives us free arcane surge and turbo arcane surge. Basically arcane surge on steroids. We chose to go energy shield, with the unique shield Aegis Aurora for recovery, and the unique body armor Ivory Tower. That chest has got to be one of the coolest default skins in the game, and it's also very powerful if built correctly. Plus, it combines extremely well with the Pain Attunement Keystone for 30% more spell damage. We combine these items with the Curse Gating Elixir unique Flask, and the Trader Keystone that we gain from the Brutal Restraint Timeless Jewel. Remember to get one with the mention blah 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 of Balbala to get the correct keystone. With that combination of items, we never have to worry about flash charges. It's like we have Pathfinder, but at home. The unique Murder Boots Bubonic Trail are absolutely mandatory for the build. They give us global reservation efficiency of skills when socketed with a unique Abyss Jewel, and in them we socket the unique Abyss Jewel Kurgal's Gaze to further increase our Arcane Surge buff effects. However, we do need to socket a Magic Abyss Jewel to benefit from the movement speed. Finally, we use Lightning Warp as our movement skill, because with a little bit of setup, it's literally the best movement skill in the game. In the description of the video, I've linked a PoB which includes 4 tiers of investment. Cheap, which is around 3 div, medium budget, which is around 30 divs, expensive, which is the setup I currently have, which is around 170-180 divs, and God tier or mirror tier, which is infinite currency. Now let's take a more in-depth look at the gear that's necessary for this build. First, let's take a look at the gloves. The cheap version of the build uses Hrimsaros. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that. They cost 1 or 2 C at best, and they're a great way to achieve 100% cold conversion. The medium budget build uses a pair of rare gloves with 35% of physical damage converted to cold as an explicit, and then uses Eldritch Implicits to get 25% additional physical damage converted to cold. My recommendation here is just to go on trade and find a pair of high ES gloves with a conversion mod, and then craft the Eldritch Implicits yourself. It shouldn't be too expensive. I crafted my current pair by buying a fractured pair of Arcanist gloves with perfect % ES. Then I used Deafening Essences of Woe until I got an open prefix, and YOLO'd a Veiled Chaos Orb. It took me a couple tries, but eventually you'll get a Veiled prefix, and eventually you'll be able to unveil the physical damage converted to cold damage mod. Once you've done that, the gloves are basically finished. You can craft prefixes cannot be changed and reroll chaos for some chaos res, but then it's just a matter of crafting the implicits. For our helmet, there aren't too many options. We basically want heatshiver and nothing else. For our enchant, we do have a little bit of leeway. If you don't have the nimis ring yet, you can get the enchant for Ethereal Knives fires projectiles in a circle. Otherwise, you can get the Ethereal Knives damage enchant. Or, if you want to make the build even snappier than it already is, you can get the reduced lightning warp duration enchant. It's really good for bossing. I didn't go with it, but I think it's a really great option. However, for the expensive version of the build, you absolutely need to get a corrupted heatshiver with socketed skill gems, get a 90% cost and reservation multiplier, or you won't be able to fit all your auras, even with an Enlightened 4, even with Determination and Helm enchant or whatever. You absolutely need it. For your boots, you don't have too many options either. You want the Bubonic Trail Murder boots, and you want the 2 Abyss Sockets version. Otherwise, the higher the reservation efficiency of skills, the better you'll be. The higher the movement speed, the faster you'll go. And as a lab enchant, you might want the damage penetrates 10% enemy elemental resistances. It's pretty good for bossing. It's a nice addition. For body armor, there are no alternatives either. This is an Ivory Tower build. Luckily, it's not too expensive. A 5 link will probably cost 50, 60 C. Maybe a 6 link is 1 divine, 120 C, I'm not sure. However, what you want to look out for on the trade site are Ivory Towers with corruptions. We're looking for +2 proj, +2 duration, or +1 all. All these 3 are great, and if you get any combination of either 3, it's big damage. For our shield, we have 2 options. Either Prism Guardian, which is extremely cheap, especially at this state of the league, and allows us to very easily reserve a lot of life for auras, or once you get enough currency for all the upgrades that go with it, you play with Aegis Aurora, which gives you a lot of survivability. For our rings, Nimis is best in slot. It doubles our damage and it makes us fire projectiles in a circle. It's literally awesome. It's game changer. However, it is a little bit pricey, so you have some other options if that's not what you want to go for, or if it's not what you can afford. You can go for a Mark of the Shaper plus an Elder Ring, or you can go for a Circle of Guilt and then any other ring of your choice. For the expensive version of the build, I went for an Onslaught on hit synthesized implicit ring, and I hit it with a couple crit multi-essences. I hit T1 cast speed, then I reforged Chaos to get some Chaos res, and I lucked out on some mana, which is a multiplier for Hierophant. Crafted some ES and I was done. Not too expensive to craft, the base was what was most expensive. For our Amulet, the best in slot is a +2 Amulet with fractured cast speed, and then some Chaos res and some defensive stats like increased armor, increased energy shield, or max energy shield. Anything less than that is a little bit of a downgrade and can be replaced by crit chance, crit multi, armor, ES, whatever. For the cheap version of the PoB, I simply put an amulet that only had +1 fizz, which is basically alteration spamming. Otherwise, you can get a Yoke of Suffering, which would achieve similar damage while giving you a lot of elemental resistances. For the medium budget, Replica Dragonflight's Fang is pretty good. It's pretty good. It definitely has some good stats. However, I never bought one because I thought it was too expensive for what it gives you. And a rare amulet with +1 and good other stats is, in my opinion, a little bit better. Weapons may seem scary for this build, but actually all our weapons are quite easily craftable. For the cheap version, I simply put a wand with +1 fizz and nothing else, which is literally a vendor recipe. So either you can alteration spam or you can go to the vendor and do the recipe. For the medium version, it's a +1 fizz with some other good mods, and the expensive version, the item I currently have, is +2 with good mods. It's a little bit tedious to craft because you alteration spam for +1 all, but if you're patient, you will get it for not too much currency. I put a detailed guide on how to craft each version and even how to craft a mirror tier version in the notes of the PoB, so be sure to take a look if you're interested. For our belt, we went for a rare Stygian Vise with Flask mods. This way we get more flask charges, more flask duration, and we can use a 4th flask efficiently without losing out on Cascading Elixir during fights. Otherwise, if you're only using 3 flasks, you're basically good to go. You can take an Ardent's Anguish to have a lot of damage and a little bit of extra armor. You can also get a rare Stygian Vise or a rare leather belt with good mods. It's up to you. If you want to craft the expensive version of the rare Stygian Vise, I'd recommend just buying off trade a Stygian Vise that has the flask mods and an open suffix. Craft suffixes cannot be changed, and reforge chaos. Hopefully you'll get a high tier chaos res, and afterwards the prefixes are not very important. You can lock suffixes and reforge defense or something like that. For our flasks, coruscating elixir is mandatory to not get one shot by every single chaos hit or chaos dot. Otherwise, you have cheap options like silver, diamond, granite, basalt flasks. Those are up to you, it's your choice. And for the more expensive versions, Bottled Faith is of course extraordinary for this build, and Taste of Hate is awesome as well. Regarding our jewels, we're using Kurgal's Gaze and a magic Hypnotic Eye jewel in our Bubonic Trail boots. Otherwise, I'd recommend using 3 rare Hypnotic Eye jewels, but sometimes it's not the best choice. Sometimes you just find rare jewels on trade that give you more defense and more offense, even while taking into account the Kurgal's Gaze Arcane Surge effect. If you have a little bit more currency, I definitely recommend the Balance of Terror for elemental weakness, gain fizz as extra element. This allows us to deal some lightning damage and to shock bosses. This is a huge damage multiplier that I didn't put in the configurations of the PoBs, but it definitely adds up. Watcher's Eye is also great for our build since we're using so many auras. In the notes of the PoB, I'll list all the mods that are good for Watcher's Eyes. In the expensive version, I'm also using an Unnatural Instinct, which is placed next to the Scion start area on the passive tree. It gives us a lot of good stats. In the cheap version of the build, I didn't put cluster jewels because I wanted to reduce cost as much as I could. However, once you get the Nimis ring, you absolutely want a cluster setup because you need at least 1 pierce. If you don't pierce once, you won't get the double damage from Nimis. So, our cluster jewels, we use a large physical damage cluster jewel with Battle Harden and Iron Breaker, and we use 2 projectile medium clusters. So one of them needs to have aerodynamics that get 1 pierce. Afterwards, the best damage nodes are Eye to Eye and Repeater. It's up to you how you roll them. Now, let's move on to skill gems. All 3 configurations have basically the same setup. It's just a question of moving around parts depending on your reservation efficiency and finding the most efficient damage support gem or using alternate quality or level 21 gems. In your body armor, you're going to want to equip Ethereal Knives, Trinity, and Arcane Surge in all 3 setups. Then, it might get a little bit tricky. If you get +1 maximum intensity on the tree, Pinpoint is your #1 damage support gem until you can afford Awakened Spell Echo. Plus, it'll make it easier to freeze things since you're hitting harder but slower. Afterwards, you're going to want increased crit chance or increased crit multi. This is going to be really dependent on your setup, so you might want to PoB it. And for your 6th link, you're going to want Inspiration or Empower. Be careful with Empower though, because you might get You want to be sure that you have more mana regen than mana cost per second. For our movement skill, we're using Lightning Warp. It can be either in our shield for the medium or expensive setup, or in our gloves as a 4-link in the cheap setup. To support Lightning Warp, you're going to want faster casting than less duration. Or, if you took the Lightning Warp Helm enchant, you can use Empower instead and get very close to 100% reduced duration, meaning no duration. As a 4-link, you'll want Swift Affliction or less duration if you already have Empower in your 3rd link. In our wand, we're going to equip our Curse and our defensive setup. So our Curse is Elemental Weakness because we deal both cold and fire damage. So we want generic Elemental Penetration. For our defensive setup, we use Molten Shell and Frost Shield. Frost Shield also gives us base crit chance for spells, so it's defensive and offensive. I really love this skill. But if you prefer, you could also use Vile Righteous Fire or maybe Tornado. In our gloves, we have our Arrogance setup. which will be in your shield if you're still using Prism Guardian. This is where you'll need to move parts around depending on your reservation efficiency. Prism Guardian is extremely efficient at reserving life auras, so you might want to socket 50% auras like Zealotry or Hatred instead of the setup I have in my gloves. With the Arrogance setup, we use Discipline, Tempest Shield, and Defiance Banner. Currently, with the reservation efficiency I have only 4 life unreserved. That means I'm maxing out the potential of Ivory Tower. In our helmet, we have Zealotry, Hatred, Determination, and Purity of Elements, if you have the Corrupted helmet with the 90% reservation. Unfortunately, if you don't, you'll have to drop an aura. I'd recommend dropping Zealotry as it's safer. Finally, in our boots, we have Herald of Purity and Precision. Be careful about Precision, you might want to adjust the level according to your reservation efficiency. Final note on this, since we're using so many auras, here we have a lot of moving parts, so you may want to move around one thing or two, depending on your reservation efficiency, if you're using a Prism Guardian or not, if you have a Corrupted Heatshiver or not. The key things here are that you want to be as low life as possible to maximize Ivory Tower, and you want to have enough mana to cast your skills. Also, I didn't detail it here, but in the PoB you'll find which alternate quality gems I find best for the build. Let's take a look at the tree now, which is going to be quite quick since there's nothing incredible, nothing groundbreaking, no special tech really with this tree. We're basically getting as much reservation efficiency and aura effect as possible, and then we're getting some caster nodes, some block nodes, glancing blows as well. We're also going for Divine Shield. Of course, we take the Trader, I've already talked about that. We go for Pain Attunement since we're low life. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The cheap version of the tree doesn't take any cluster jewels, so we have some crit nodes, some block nodes as well. And once we get to the medium or expensive setup, we take a cluster jewel, so we're not taking as many offensive nodes. Once you switch from a pair of Hrim Sorrows to a pair of Rare Gloves, you will need to take the Cold Conversion Mastery. Additionally, there's a Cold Mastery that makes enemies permanently take 5% increased damage for each second they've been frozen by you, up to a maximum of 50%, which is insane. It gives huge damage. The damage numbers that I've shown you do not take this into account, but this is actually huge damage. You also have this effect, though less potent, for chilled if you take Glacial Cage, which is 1% increased damage for each second they've been chilled, up to a maximum of 10%. So yeah, 10 seconds of combat and the enemies will take a shitload of damage. This is why this build is extremely good at killing Uber-Cirrus, if that's something you want to do. If you input this in the PoB as well as the shock, because we usually shock for around 8, 9, 10, sometimes 15%. If you put 10% shock plus the 10 seconds of freeze and 10 seconds of chill, we're up to 140 million DPS, which is quite good. Before I get to my conclusion, in case some of you were wondering about leveling with this skill, I did not try it. I leveled as a Righteous Fire. I followed Pox's guide. Yeah, I'm quite bad at leveling. The best run I've ever done on League Start is like 5 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, you might be able to level with this skill, but I wouldn't recommend it. It does need a little bit of investment and a little bit of setup to feel comfortable. So yeah, Pox's Righteous Fire or any Tai Killer guide on max roll is probably much better than leveling with this skill. So now what's my conclusion? Well, I guess this build feels incredible and I'm very proud of it. I even made a video about it, even though I'm not a content creator. But yeah, I killed all Ubers deathless. I haven't finished my 38 challenges yet, but I'm on track to finish them. I've already done the most complicated challenges. I still haven't done the vendor recipes, for example. And yeah, it's an extremely fast, extremely pleasant Sanctum farmer. During the whole video, it was just one random Sanctum run that I recorded. It was a 20-minute run. And yeah, there are a few texts that can be incorporated. For example, if some of you have watched Paelstron's Lightning Warp character, I'm pretty sure you could incorporate that in the build. You need to fix reservation efficiency because you'd lose charisma, but it's definitely something doable, and then you'd have instant Lightning Warp on top of millions, tens and millions of DPS. Yeah, so it feels extremely good to play. It clears well, it bosses well, it freezes everything, and well, you play long neck with big armor, and everyone likes to play long neck with big armor. So if anyone has stayed until the end, thank you very much. This video took way longer than I'd like to admit to make. Respect to the content creators who release 5 videos every week. So I'm gonna leave the rest of the Sanctum run, at least until the Lycia kill, and maybe add in an uber elder run that had some pretty close calls, but you'll see that it went quite smoothly. And yeah, I guess see you next time, maybe? I don't know.